Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Us and My Life. Love you and cause I love you so much. Oh, 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 I just love you. I just like help. I just like help. I just like you too. I just like you. I just love you.
Well, that was Ariana. And I just that's one thing that's where Ron went to take the box to the post office. And I realized after I had everything sealed up that I spelled her name wrong. So, but hello, everybody. This is Optimize My Life radio show brought to you by the Hope Collection. And today we have the pleasure of hearing from Beth Wyman, who is a registered dietitian, and this is Nutrition Matters. And while we're talking, I'm going to run and get a glass of water because it's so hot in the house. It's too hot, and it's very dry.
It is. I have yet to clean them and get them set up, but we usually use humidifiers this time of year, and we don't even have forced hot air heat. We have like baseboard radiators.
Oh yeah.
So it's not as drying, but it's still so dry. And then in the irony, I have a dehumidifier in my basement, so that doesn't get too wet. It's like we can't all share and just even out across the house. The basement gets too moist and damp, and then the upper part of the house is dry and hot, and always something.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, one of those things where I've realized that like having a house is just a constant project. It's never going to be quote unquote done and then like, ready to go and I don't have to do anything. There's always something, like a project to work on, or obviously like something to clean. Like I'm Swiffering my house while we're on the podcast. And it's, looking at it that way has really helped me not feel as frustrated with like, oh my God, there's always something to do. It's like, well, yeah, like I have a house. There's always something to do.
Right, exactly.
And if it's not this, it's something else. And if it's not this project, it's something else. Or, yes, everything's nice and clean upstairs, but now there's laundry to fold. Like, so I'm trying to look at it more of like, okay, sort of always looking for what's next rather than try to hurry up and finish.
And finish it, because you'll never be finished. Laundry never finishes. There's two of us in the house. Cat doesn't wear many clothes, but there's two of us. It's amazing how much laundry two of us can make.
Oh, absolutely.
And so,
I have an absolute mountain downstairs. And then something that I feel like I never understood as a child that I definitely understand better now is like, it's clean, just go find it in the clean laundry pile. I don't know, it didn't bother me that much. It definitely bothered my brother to like that things weren't upstairs and like done. And I completely get it. I'm like, you're lucky it's clean. Go downstairs and find it. And my son's now old enough to go look and find his own, and my daughter's not quite there yet. Like, she's only 5, so she's not quite there yet. But yeah, I'm excited when it's all clean. But then it's literally momentary because we're all still wearing clothes, and then those go in the laundry.
Well, with us, because my laundry is in the basement, I can't, keep it down there. It's a clean basement, but it's not a finished basement by any means. So, having to bring it up, and I think that's I don't have a laundry room. So when the laundry is in, laundry baskets in the bedroom, it just drives me crazy. So I'm constantly running up and down the stairs. So I think of it as running as part of my exercise. So instead of just saying, "Oh, I have to go to the basement," I'm purposely saying, it's like fooling myself that I'm doing more exercise than I really am, but I'm taking it as a part of my exercise.
Well, honestly, it is. It's movement, right? It's that, it's that non-thermogenic, whatever. It's called, the acronym is NEAT, and I can never remember what it stands for. But, it technically is. You're using energy to move around and do those things.
That's true.
I know on my days, quote-unquote, off, where I'm not doing my desk job, I'm just at home, I get in more steps than days I'm working, significantly more steps, because I'm doing stuff outside, I'm in and out of the house, I'm cleaning, all of that is movement, and that's kind of the cool thing of step trackers, because then you can see how much you actually walked throughout the day.
True.
Yeah. So even though it's not formal exercise, you're moving, right?
I'm even doing that with my vacuuming. I'm full on board vacuuming. So it keeping the movement. But we're all just about all decorated for the holidays, for Christmas, and which has really been fun. So which is a little early, but I usually do it the day after Thanksgiving, and so we got that done. I just realized Ron ran to the store, but I have his phone. So he did. Hopefully, now yesterday he went out. This is one of the things with being retired. We hadn't moved the car since Thanksgiving. Well, no, since the day before Thanksgiving. And then it got really cold, and he was almost on empty as it was. And so he ran to the store yesterday, got to the parking lot, and he said, for some reason, I backed into a parking spot. He says, I never back into a parking spot, but he did. He got out of the store, the car would not work. And so he called the service that we have, and they came in 5 minutes, jumped the car, and so everything worked out fine. But it was just the fact that it was cold and hadn't been run for a while. So
that makes a difference.
It really does, and it's not that old of a car, but it was that much cold and not not being started, which was highly unusual for us.
That's that you did all your holiday stuff at home, so you didn't have to go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we hosted, so we didn't go out, and then we didn't do any Black Friday shopping or anything. Actually, I did, but I did it online, so I didn't.
I saw something that said why don't grocery stores have Black Friday sales? I would get out of bed for half off meat prices. I was like, that is not a bad idea. I would. I would love
they
that.
make enough money. They don't need to have any more sales, I guess.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, they're doing just fine. Yeah, and those prices are always going up, and that's something that we see a lot with the food security work that I'm doing now. That it's the price of the food is just so high that people can get some, but not enough.
Right.
Right, because if your dollar amount coming in is still the same, but the cost of food is higher, you can still get some food, just not enough food. So it's this
Right.
like in between area of like you might not qualify to get like EBT, like SNAP benefits, what used to be called food stamps. So like SNAP benefits or anything like that, but it's still like super expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I've said on here before too, like I usually go grocery shopping at Aldi's just because it's cheaper. It's the same food. And then
I like Aldi's. We buy we buy a lot from Aldi's.
Yeah. And they usually save on a lot of costs because they're if I believe the model is that their operating costs are lower, right? They don't have to do cart returns because you bring your own cart back to get your quarter back. They don't have somebody that bags the groceries, so there's a savings on labor costs. They don't there's a lot of different things where they've cut costs, and it's not necessarily that like the food is of a lower quality to get that cost down. I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of a misconception that it's like not as good for some reason, right? And there's that like health halo around places like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, and not so much Trader Joe's, but definitely Whole Foods. It tends to be really expensive.
I was very unimpressed with Whole Foods. First of all, it's on the other side of town. It's in the fancier side of town than we are. And so it's not, it's not convenient. It's not something I would go to all the time. But we did go once, and I was I was very underwhelmed, I must say.
And it's like if somebody enjoys it and has the resources, like sure. I mean, you're not hurting anything, but just recognize your privilege to be able to shop there, I guess. More than anything, like that's great. If you like it, that's wonderful, but don't look down on somebody that can't. Like your whatever is, your lettuce is no better because it came from there.
Right.
Or whatever it might be. So things to keep in mind. And actually on the idea of like where we started with like how the house is a continual project was kind of my idea for today, to talk about how there's no like perfect end goal to the way that you're eating. It's just something that you always kind of keep in the back of your mind, are not like, I guess, working on, right? Something that you're continually putting some kind of at least low-level effort into. And that's going to look different depending on, like, where you are in life, what your capability is to focus on it. But hopefully it always has at least a little bit of focus so that you can continue to stay healthy, right? There are long-term impacts to completely ignoring what you're eating and just going for whatever's most convenient, because usually those foods are not nutrient dense, right? I hate using like good or bad in food, but you can say like, okay, well, this is not nutrient dense, and so like a bag of chips is not nutrient dense, but an apple is, kind of a thing. And so where we might traditionally think of something as good or bad, we can think of, okay, is it nutrient dense or not nutrient dense? And that way there's no like shame, or at least it helps reduce the shame around food choices. It's not like, oh, I'm being bad, I'm having chips. It's like, nope, I'm choosing to eat this today. Or it might change what you choose or how often you choose something, because you're like, well, this is not a nutrient-dense option. It's really not doing anything for my body. Maybe I pick something different that's actually going to be nourishing and help me, even though a small bag of chips and an apple are about the same calorie amount. They're both high in carbohydrates. They have different stuff in them, right? So like for that example, your apple will have fiber and vitamins and minerals in it and antioxidants and things like that, versus your chips will have, even if it's a bag of baked chips, right? Let's take some of the fat content out too for the sake of comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, it's a potato, but you're not getting the skin in, you're not getting the fiber. So yeah, you're going to get some potassium. It's a potato, but you're not getting the fiber as if you were having like baked red potatoes with the skin still on or something. So, right, there's things to consider. And I don't like doing like food is good or bad and thinking of it, reframing, and it definitely takes effort, and it's like talking to yourself at first, but reframing to, okay, this is nutrient dense, this is not nutrient dense, kind of helps remove that morality around the food choices. And
good, yeah.
Yeah, and this time of year, I feel like we're near family more, and so often it's like food choices get judged, and your weight gets judged, and there's all kinds of things that come up with family gatherings. And so this can help on a couple different levels, right? It helps you approach the food and feel more secure in your choice, but then also gives you like scripting of what to say if somebody does make a comment about your food. If somebody's like, oh, well, you're eating another apple, which I mean, that'd be weird to say, but you'd be like, yeah, and it's, this is a nutrient-dense choice for my body. And it also hopefully helps increase your mindfulness so that you don't end up being, not you, Linda, but like, don't end up being the one that says something like about somebody else's food choices. Because sometimes we don't even recognize that we're saying something or doing something until we're halfway through it, and then you're like, oh, that was not a great choice. Not have said that. Yeah. And it's like, so working on that reframing helps in a lot of different ways for how you speak to other people, how you speak to yourself, how you interpret what other people are saying to you. So, and I know that there's just so much more of that this time of year. And like, with just maybe family that you haven't seen in a while or family that has no filter. And we can't change them, so we can change how we react or interact. And that's really all we can do. And sometimes having that scripting or just having the background knowledge of, okay, I've made this choice for my body and feeling secure in it can help when presented with those scenarios. And in terms of like making the personal choice of what to eat, right? Having that guideline of like, all right, is this nutrient dense? Is this nourishing for my body? Can really help you figure out if it's something you actually want to eat or if it's something that you can pass on. The good news is we're constantly surrounded by treats and access to all kinds of different food. And so I usually say, like, if it's not the best version of something, it's like for like sweet treats and things, like it's not really assessed. Yeah, like, is it really worth it? Like, it's not physically, it's not doing anything for you. But if it's emotionally doing something for you, like, that's valid, and we can certainly recognize that. Like, oh, my God, this is my grandma's cookie that we only have once a year. Like, then cool, have it. Like, and I know we talked about this last week of, like, there's a difference between having, like, even 3 versus, 2 dozen or a slice of pie versus the whole pie is, I think, the example I used last week. And I know, like, so we're doing cookie decorating on Saturday, I'm not back up to doing like cookie exchanges, but we're doing some kids cookie decorating on Saturday. And so I'm going to be making, I actually don't know how many cookies yet. I'm waiting to hear back from a couple of people on if they're coming or not. But I'll be making a whole bunch of cookies. And then it's like, okay, well, how much of the dough am I eating while I'm cooking them, which I fully recognize is not safe or healthy. But right, like, yeah, it's like how much of the dough?
Ron. He eats the dough, and it's like, no, you don't eat the dough.
Yeah, it's like there's definitely a salmonella risk to that. And it's not just from the eggs; it's actually from the raw flour too. There's a risk of foodborne illness from the raw flour. So
I never thought of that.
Yeah. So it's assessing how much of that I ate or didn't eat, and then, okay, how many cookies are you going to eat while you're decorating?
Yes.
And so it comes down to how mindful are you being, or how mindful am I being? Because it's going to be me on Saturday. How mindful am I being? Am I hungry? Do I need to also make sure that I do. I need to make sure that I eat a meal, right? And not be like, oh, well, I had 3 cookies. That's enough calories, so I just won't eat lunch or something. Like, that's not how it works. And that comes back to that nutrient density thing, right? Like, yeah, it might be enough calories to sustain me, but it's not what my body needs to be healthy. Right. It's not going to give me protein. It's not going to give me it'll have some, but not a lot. It's not going to give me all of the stuff that I need. So I'm going to make sure that I eat lunch. It helps that I'm making the cookies for a group, because then I'm less likely to taste test the batter, because I feel weird, like, re-dipping a spoon in or something when I know I'm feeding it to other people.
Yes.
So that will help. And then we're decorating after lunch. It's going to be like around 1. So I know we're going to have had lunch first. So that helps with like I'm hungry, I'll take a little snack piece of things. Right? I'm trying to...
At the cookie exchange, we don't eat the cookies. But I have
you guys
a
wait?
veggie tray.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone just divvies them up and takes them home. I'll have some shrimp and cocktail sauce, a veggie tray. Ron makes a dill dip, and so I'll have rye bread with a dill dip and some cheese and crackers and a punch. That's what I serve. So it's just, and so we really don't eat anything sweet that day.
And that's, like having other options can be a huge help. So I'm thinking, like, I'm going to put out a veggie tray with dip, because there's going to be a lot of kids, and that's easy for them to just grab and take. I don't know. Well, I mean, my son will be super into shrimp cocktail if I do that, but having other things out. So, like, okay, if you are feeling a little bit snackish, go ahead. But what are you picking, right? And like even the like rye bread with dip, you're getting in a lot more nutrients than if you were eating cookies. So there's all kinds of ways around it, and it comes down to really like being honest with yourself and seeing if you're overindulging, which can be really an uncomfortable thing to take a look at. And that's where sometimes holiday eating, especially at like holiday meals, gets out of hand, and people like overindulge and take it way too far, instead of taking it home for leftovers. Like, I've had Thanksgiving dinner now, like for like I think like 4 dinners. because I took home a bunch of leftovers from my parents' house and have been using that, and it's been great. I do the entire meal again 4 times, in addition to the times where I've like used it to make other things.
Right, that's what we had obviously chicken left over, but we were laughing on Thanksgiving that we had so many vegetable dishes, and because Ron's sister brought corn and a squash, and I had carrots and another different kind of squash, a green salad. So we had and not as many vegetables as my mom would have put on, but you know, we were laughing, you know, how that the vegetables outweighed everything else. And we did have mashed potatoes and gravy, though. That was, I did have my mashed potatoes and gravy.
Good. That's one of those classic things that I feel like makes Thanksgiving. I also just love mashed potatoes, so it always makes the meal. Yeah, but it's, you know, it's a shift sometimes to have more of your plate taken up by vegetables, but that's usually what is recommended, right, is to make your half of your plate fruits and vegetables. And everybody's got a little bit different situation in terms of whether or not that works for them. But that's the general recommendation, is to have half of your plate as fruits and vegetables. And it seems so simplistic, but sometimes that's what we need, especially during these busy seasons, is something that's really like boiled down, very simplistic. Okay, is half of my plate fruits or veggies? Yes? Cool. I'm on the right track. Right? And part of it being a journey is that sometimes you have to let go, and it's not going to be super planned or exactly down to like your macros that maybe you were calculating when life was a little bit slower. And just letting it be, okay, half of my plate is fruits or veggies. I know I'm on the right track, because that's going to, it limits your calorie intake because the fruits and vegetables will be lower calorie. It's going to increase your fiber intake because those are foods that have fiber. And then it limits your portions of everything else because half of your plate is taken up by fruits and vegetables. Right. So even though it seems overly simplified, there's a reason that was the chosen simplification, because when you do that, so many other things fall into place. So it gives you one simple, not necessarily easy, but one simple thing to focus on, and to let other things fall in line without having to devote brain power to them. Because I know this time of year my brain power is thin. It is spread out. I am wrapping up the year for running the household. So like I have different spreadsheets and stuff that I need to wrap up, and I have Christmas and making sure not only that I buy gifts, but then other people know what to get my children, and we're not doing duplicative gift giving, and still managing like their social calendars and what they're doing for their events and going to school functions, and it just gets busier. So it's not necessarily that I'm like, I don't want to lose sight of how I'm eating, but I cannot give it as much focus as I did before. So there's an ebb and a flow, and right now it's an ebb, and I need that simplicity of just, okay, I got a vegetable in, cool, I'm doing great. And it doesn't, like, releasing whether or not it matches, right, with the meal. So it just, whatever it might happen to be. Like, we did cheeseburgers the other night, and we had sliced cucumbers with it. Because I was so focused on making the hamburgers, I was like, oh God, we have lettuce and tomato on them, but that's not quite enough. I was like, I need more. So we just cut up a cucumber and had that on the side. Like, does it quote unquote match? Is it what you would traditionally see with a burger? Not even close. But the kids loved it. It got eaten. And
Yeah,
I
that's important.
I was actually just talking with somebody about this morning that was like, well, I only like these certain vegetables. I'm like, cool. So eat those. I'm like, I don't particularly, like, unless you have other conditions where you're limiting certain, like vitamins and minerals because of medications and things, I don't really care what vegetables you eat. I just care that you ate some. Like, we need to start somewhere. And if that's where we start, then cool. And if that's as far as you get, you're still doing your body such a service by including those ones. And if you like them, all the better, because then it has, like, this positive cycle to it. And there's something to be said for, like, getting a little bit of joy out of the things you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important
to just
though, because otherwise
have a little bit of life
you don't do it. You know. Yeah.
Have you tried the elimination diets?
Hi. So elimination diets, I usually use just with my folks that have IBS where it's warranted. Or, like, if there's a food sensitivity issue or a food allergy concern, that's typically done through allergy testing. But elimination diets are super helpful for folks that have IBS and are trying to figure out not only the exact foods that bother their condition, but then, like, what the limit is. Because a lot of times you can tolerate some of the different foods that can be irritating, but it depends sort of if you're in a flare, if you're not in a flare, how stressed you are, things like that. There's a lot that comes into it. But elimination diets are rigorous for sure. So I think of
I know.
certain situations.
Oh no, I was gonna say because a lot of people in America have all these health problems, and it is definitely related to the stuff that we eat. We find out that a lot of the food that we put in our face is not actually food. It's some, chemicalized. Somebody made it up in a lab and then they tossed it in. I was wondering.
Yeah, like which ones do you find? Like, are there certain things that you find that you feel have been made in a lab?
A lot of our meat, like our processed meat and cheeses, and almost all the pasta.
So
yeah, like a lot
of
of the bread.
Yeah, a lot of those are processed in factories, right? Versus, it's like an oversized kitchen, right? It's an industrial factory to make different products. And there is some testing on lab-grown meat, but that hasn't been approved for sale by the FDA.
Why are they doing that Why are they doing that on a mass scale in Texas?
So they might be doing some research on it, but for lab-grown meat,
no, ma'am. No, that's being sold into the markets and out of Texas.
So
a lot.
Do you have references on that? Because I'd be happy to share that out with our listeners if you have some solid references about it.
I love this forum for the ability to speak on it. I just randomly called in. I saw what you guys were talking about, and I spoke on it. I'm over here with empty pockets, though.
Yeah, so this is a very, science-backed type show, and so when we bring things to it, they're backed by research or articles, and so if you have those to share about that happening, I'd be happy to take a look. But as far as I'm aware, lab-grown meat is something that is in research and development. It has not been at all approved for sale and consumption by the human population.
Do you have an email I can send that to you?
Absolutely. My email is Beth Wyman, WYMAN, RD, as in registered dietitian, @gmail.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
If we just divert back to basic human physiology, do you want to talk about the fact that we didn't have all these sugars, processed anything until recently, and like how we introduced this after the mass production of food, and how it was so convenient after World War I and II. You know, like this is a brand new introduction to our food supply.
So a lot of like mass-produced, I guess, processed.
Like, do you remember government cheese?
So a lot of the mass-produced food items happened after World War II. This is where you saw more canned food, more TV dinners, and it was really the start also of women continuing in the workplace after having gone in when so many of the men went to fight in World War II. And so we had this need for more convenience items, and they've certainly grown and shifted over the years. And we can find, say, like canned products that are low or no added salt instead of the high sodium products that they were at the beginning. Because remember that sodium is something that's used as a preservative. Frozen meals and things certainly have a long way to go still, and that's more of a flavor concern. So there's typically a lot of sodium content in those as well. And so there is still certainly work to be done, but those basically those preserved foods, either through canning or freezing, have gone a long way in being able to supply food to people, right, and helping to resolve hunger issues, not only throughout the world, but right here in America, in our own backyard, too. So I never like to put like any canned or processed food like on the chopping block, because sometimes that is the food access. Now, with things like added sugar, that's really done for flavor. It's not necessarily done for preservation. And so a lot of those foods we can certainly reduce, and there's been quite an effort to have canned fruits done in juice rather than in syrup, because of all of the added sugars, right? As people are leaning into more of the convenience of a canned product, you see an increased consumption in these products that are canned in either light or heavy syrup, doesn't matter. It's still added sugar. And so with that increased consumption came the need to shift to canning things in juice to make it healthier for the population. And so you can find most all fruits canned in juice, either in their own juice or sometimes it's in pear juice, because that's very mild and isn't going to change the flavor. And that way you're not having all of this additional sugar put into the product. And so it's this continued evolvement, because it is relatively new, like you said, to have this market of preserved products that you can buy versus doing home preservation. That's a skill that's sort of been lost a lot. Is this home preservation?
Back in the day we'd have canning and jarring and stuff. You know, you'd be able to grow your own food. You could have peppers that would probably last about 8 months.
Yeah, so we've been eating canned and preserved foods for a much longer time than they've been available in the stores, but we were doing it at home. So it was slightly different that way. And so you were still seeing canning in syrup. You were seeing canning in high salt items. You were seeing salted dried meats as a way of preservation of the food item to have foods throughout the winter. And so there was also this sort of cycle to how we were eating. So our bodies don't look at things just on a day-to-day basis. It's sort of the culmination of everything we're doing. And so if you're going to go back historically, we ate very differently throughout the seasons as well.
Yeah, it's when they start tossing chemicals into it that you can't pronounce, and, you know, red dye number 5, yellow 30, all this, you know, we don't really need that in our diet, obviously.
So the things that are preserving the food, sometimes you do need to be able to extend the shelf life and ship it and have it available, right? You certainly can make all of your own food, but that's not necessarily everybody's case in life. They might not have the access to a kitchen to make it or to the space to store it. And even if you or I can't pronounce the ingredient, that doesn't make it unsafe or unhealthy. It just means that they can't.
The simplicity of what I'm coming, the simplicity of where I'm coming from is that if you don't understand what you're putting in your face, like you don't recognize it, you probably shouldn't do that.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, so that's
I understand that we have made so many innovations. I get it. I understand that we've made so many innovations. I also grew up on a farm.
Yeah, and
so when I see like orange carrots, that doesn't make sense to me.
And that's okay if you don't feel comfortable eating it, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad. So it comes down to what is appropriate food access, right? And what's going to be right for each individual. And if you have concerns about whatever is in a particular item that you're eating, that you're going to a trusted resource to learn more about it. And one of the things with the abundance of information that we have access to at this point is we also have access to a lot of opinions. So what we're reading is not always a like a fact-based whatever article or something. It may be an opinion article, and so it can get very murky when we're looking things up. And this is where it's important to go to a food expert, right? So depending on what it is you're looking at or your concerns, it might be that you talk to somebody who is an expert in food manufacturing and that sort of thing. Or if you're concerned about how the food's interacting with your health, you would talk to a registered dietitian. And knowing that a nutritionist is a completely unregulated term, so if somebody's just calling themselves a nutritionist, that doesn't make them a food expert. It just means that they have an interest in food, and that there is, more of a background for somebody that's a dietitian.
You got to have a sense of humor about how all those people survived for all those thousands of years without any of these job titles, and you just ate stuff because you knew that it was food. You didn't need some expert to tell you that it was food.
And we definitely have more exposures to different things. We have higher rates of disease, but we also have higher rates of survival of so many things that would have killed us off, however many years ago. Not even that many. It might only be 50 years ago. Things that were a death sentence then aren't now. One of the biggest things that I usually think of with my food lens, right, is something like diabetes. We have so much more control over it, so much more education about how it works. We've got insulin now, which is still relatively new in the grand scheme of humans, to be able to supplement with additional insulin when somebody's body stops making it. That it is different than it was so many years ago.
You don't think their intake of their caloric, like the stuff that people eat, causes diabetes and their inability to create insulin?
So diabetes happens for a variety of reasons and is super, super nuanced. You can't necessarily say that it's caused by what you're necessarily eating, right? And it's also important to keep in mind that there's type 1 and type 2, and now they're looking at a potential like 2.5, 1.5, 3. All these different nuances are continuing to evolve as we do additional research. And so for a type 1 diabetic, it doesn't matter how you eat. You're still going to be diabetic. That's not ever going to go away. Yeah,
I'm just confused as to how, it might not have been recognized like 500 years ago. It might have just been a dead kid.
Yep, you would have just died.
Yeah.
Same thing with like food allergies. You would have just died. So it's just different now.
Well, do you have any anything to say about the food allergies when it comes to like peanuts and stuff? How we got so hypersensitive to it that the kids that ate the peanuts when they were kids actually were fine because they adapted to it, and then we started taking all of that stuff and making it impossible for those. Yeah. Do you think that we manufactured a food allergy because we were trying to be hypersensitive to children?
So there are a bunch of different schools of thought in terms of allergy exposure for children, and I know it's continuing to evolve. And so that's really a great question to ask, like an allergist, in terms of that, because it's really more about the histamine reaction in the body versus like a food, like nutrient interaction. It's a histamine reaction to the proteins found in the food item.
No, I was just trying to pick your brain. I appreciate your time. I wasn't trying to bother
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, and it's probably disappointing because I do stay very science-based, and so I don't tend to demonize food, and I actually am in support of packaged food items and recognize that, like, even locally grown or growing your own food efforts are wonderful if you have the resources and have the space and the time and the knowledge and, frankly, the money to even start it. And that's really not everybody's position. And so it will always need to exist if we are to address hunger. I mean, globally, but also right here in America, those foods will continue to need to exist. And with some of the work that I'm doing now in terms of, like, food access and food security, it's one of the big things that I've been doing is, like, dismantling this belief that canned vegetables aren't as good for you. And truly, they're typically picked riper than our foods that we're buying fresh in the grocery store. And so there is the chance that they're actually more nutrient dense than the fresh ones that you're buying in the grocery store because they're picked closer to ripeness. Same thing goes for frozen vegetables too.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a wonderful way to be able to access food. Yeah, I mean, this spins right down the road that I go with, like, GMOs and things as well. That if we are to continue to feed such a large population, we will need GMO foods, and it's really just a sped up version of the, like, slicing and splicing of different hybrid blends of plants that have been done for generations. It's just a sped up version of that.
Yeah, without doing that, think of corn. How, because of the slicing and dicing, and how it's changed over the years from something that was basically unedible to how the different varieties that we have now that are resistant to the drought and but you're still getting the yield. And when you think back 100, 200 years ago, the way to preserve meat or so many things was just using salt. Well, because since science, we have come across it. And having, like you said, with the frozen vegetables and things, that we have so much more food available to us now than we did 200 years ago.
Oh,
or even 100
absolutely.
years ago.
It's something that's really rapidly changing and expanding, right? Because you think that this boom of canned foods that for purchase, right, so not made at home for purchase, really was like World War II era. And that really wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of life.
That was about 10 seconds ago.
Yeah.
In written language terms.
It is new, and so it will continue to evolve as we learn things. And that doesn't mean it doesn't necessarily mean that we knew of certain, like, dangers or issues all along, and they were being, quote unquote, like, hidden or anything. It just means that new information came out, and so we adapt and adjust, and that's just part of life. I mean, in all situations, we're continuing to adapt and adjust.
Well, my point in that statement was simply a healthy mistrust in how things go when you don't understand how it happens. Everybody should just take a moment to just, back up a little bit and be like, man, I don't even understand. Like, I understand all the canning. I literally had to do that when I was a kid. I had to. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I get it.
And there is a lot of people that don't have that experience and have never learned how to can. Like, it's not something that we did in my family growing up. It's something that my mom started after I was in college. So it's something that came back from college and learned about. And so it's, everybody's experience is definitely different with that exposure to home canning. And it's something that is a great resource if you, one, have the extra to be able to can, and the knowledge of how to do it. It's a great preservation method because then you're not using up space and electricity in a freezer, and adding extra cost to your food storage because it's canned on a shelf.
Just imagine how many pilgrims would have actually survived the voyage across the Atlantic if they had canned food.
Well, and it's interesting when you bring up like seafaring. One of the big things that happened with sailors was scurvy because they didn't have access to anything with vitamin C. So that's literally just they needed to eat like oranges, strawberries, peppers, and they would have been fine.
Isn't it weird that wasn't actually a naturally occurring thing in like Britain? That's not, you don't have oranges and that's not.
Well, they have berries and things that have vitamin C in them.
Yeah, they had berries.
Yeah. So there's other ways to get it than our traditional like oranges that we think of, definitely. But there's, in terms of like not knowing about it or how it works or what goes into like that food manufacturing process, it's certainly something that you have to be careful looking it up because sometimes you end up with like the fear-mongering documentaries about the horrors of industrialized food, which like the way that they depict it does look absolutely terrible. But like if you have other ideas, I would suggest that you like bring them forward to the USDA, who has to inspect and approve like meat packing plants. And just keep in mind that all of these things are in fact regulated. And that was done because the government needed to step in because manufacturers don't have the population's best interests in mind. Their entire interest is just making money, right? That's their job. They're a business. And so we have this intermediary step with regulatory agencies like the USDA and FDA to try to help protect the population from poor manufacturing processes. And like especially, right, a great example are the foodborne illness outbreaks that have been in the news recently. There's been E. coli and salmonella outbreaks. And so there are, right, and those get reported and investigated. They get tracked back to either like a particular farm, a particular manufacturing plant, and then what would probably happen after that is there needs to be like a corrective action process and things like that to help make sure that it doesn't happen again. It means that their system for protecting the population, them being the manufacturer, was broken somewhere along the way and needs to be adjusted. Because if we're going according to the manufacturing processes that are put out to protect, or like the regulations and guidelines that are put out to protect people, those things wouldn't happen because things would be cleaned appropriately and contamination wouldn't happen and things like that. But there's always that element of maybe they were, right, and this is pure speculation. Maybe they were trying to speed up manufacturing and so a step got missed. Maybe there's additional human components, and whenever you introduce a human component, there's more risk for error. So there's all kinds of things that can cause
that was actually very much on point with what I was saying before, is that the human component on the regulation is just as fallible.
Yeah, and so we do have regulatory agencies in place to try to help prevent that through inspections. And then if there are outbreaks and issues that happen, that look at why they happen and help to correct to prevent future outbreaks too. So it's almost like every time there is one, we get a little bit better at preventing them. And so that helps keep us healthy.
Yes. What is your take if I went to drive down to a small town and talk to an Amish family about getting raw milk?
I mean, you can certainly go talk to them about raw milk if you want. I mean, there's a reason we invented pasteurization. And you might find that a lot of them actually boil their milk before they drink it.
the Food and Drug Administration has been hammering the Amish community. It's kind of embarrassing, actually.
Yeah, it's going to depend whether or not they're doing it for their own consumption versus sale, and that's where regulation gets involved. I mean, what you choose to grow and cultivate and feed and consume on your own is your own problem, but then it's once you're giving it to other people for profit.
Doesn't that deviate from the maxim of law, caveat emptor, to the buyer beware, where you're responsible for everything that you purchase, and the government, as sweet of a nanny as it might be, has no oversight in your behavior at all, because they're terrible at everything.
Sorry, you're cutting out there at the end. You're saying that the government's terrible at oversight?
The government is terrible at almost everything. I will confidently say everything it does.
I think that's a gross overstatement.
I'm fine with that, because when I want to drive down the street and walk half a mile into the Amish community and ask for a gallon of unfettered milk, untouched, brand new, fresh out of the cow, then the FDA comes in and they start hassling those same people because it's not pasteurized. That kind of makes me one of those angry Americans, where it's like we kind of started a revolution over people taxing us on stuff, and now you're messing with these people.
But there's because so many people got sick from unpasteurized, which is why Pasteur developed pasteurization.
Right.
So, yeah.
I know, and you know what? At the end of the day, you choose what you buy. You can go to the grocery store anywhere in America.
You could smoke cigarettes all day too, but it doesn't help your body. So,
yeah, and it's,
help your body.
you have the
difference.
choice.
The difference is this religious community doesn't mess with technology. All of their milk that will come out of there is not going to be pasteurized, and there are people around them willing to buy it because there might be some benefit. And then the government comes in and messes everything up, as the government always does, in every single possible situation they've ever encountered. Do you guys understand what I'm saying?
No, I don't. So the problem is here that there aren't benefits to drinking raw milk. There's zero. There's actually an intense amount of harm.
Okay. How much money would you like to bet on that, though?
This
like lots of it, though?
Not.
I know. But it's the same thing you were telling me earlier, where you have an idea about, I'm saying that before pasteurized milk, people lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Who knows how much time we were drinking milk? You can't say that, I can't say that. But we just
historically,
recently,
it's not something that we drank. Honestly,
right.
And we covered this in another episode. Historically, milk is not something. Milk from other animals is not something that humans consumed. Honestly, I'm going to stop this conversation right here because we're getting into really dangerous territory where I don't want anyone to hear parts of this show and think that raw milk is an okay thing to consume. So I am going to stop you right here. Thank you so much for bringing up these amazing topics, because they are things that need to be talked about, but we are going to stick with things that are very, very safe from a public health perspective, and that includes milk that's been pasteurized. And while it is possible to buy raw milk, please don't actually drink it. And if you are buying raw milk for some reason because that's your only access, please boil it first. That's the closest thing you're going to get to pasteurization. And growing up I have a grandmother who did grow up with raw milk. That's what they got. That was the only option. And they always boiled it before they drank it to be safe and make sure that they weren't going to get any kind of foodborne illnesses, including listeria. And so there are people that lived quite a long time and were having these foods before us. However, there was quite a few people who also died from foodborne illness that we know is very preventable. And especially something like listeria is extremely important.
to avoid, and something that's so easily avoidable if we have properly prepared food items, right? So it's extremely important, especially for anybody that is pregnant or considering becoming pregnant, because not only can it hurt you and give you foodborne illness, but it can also damage your developing fetus and potentially either cause lifelong congenital defects or even miscarriage or what's called a spontaneous abortion when you're far enough along in your pregnancy. So no, raw milk is not a safe choice, nor is it healthy, nor are there additional benefits that outweigh the potential risks of consuming it.
Well, Beth, we are out of time, but thank you, everyone, for a wonderful, good discussion. Beth, we really appreciate your knowledge.
Whew. All right.
But, yeah, thank you. We'll pick this up or go on to another topic next week.
Okay.
But
Bye, Linda.
We are offline. Bye-bye.